Hello, Facebook. Hello, women. Let's talk about moderation today. I think I'm live. It's always a little hard to be sure. It looks like it here, but it doesn't look like it there. Yeah, I think I'm live. Let me know. It looks like I can see if people leave comments. I want to talk about this question of moderation in all things because this idea was holding me back as far as getting breakthroughs in healthy eating and weight loss. And it's been holding a lot of my clients back. So I really want to look at the question of moderation with a more critical eye. And I'd love to have some interaction with you in the comments. So please let me know if you can see me, hear me, and if you have some thoughts to share about this idea. So moderation seems like a great idea. It just seems right? This idea has been around for millennia. You don't want to go to this extreme and you don't want to go to that extreme. You just want to take a balanced kind of approach and moderate. But are there some things we don't moderate? I mean, the idea of moderation in all things, I always think, well, I don't try to moderate heroin, right? I think it's not safe. I think it's too addictive. I think it would do bad things in my life. So I don't try to moderate that. Kitty wants to get out. Okay, just a second. Because he's not going to stop. Come here, honey. Excuse me, it's a little bit of a zoo here. I feel I have perhaps one too many animals to take care of since I just got a puppy. So now I have two dogs, two German Shepherds, and I have two indoor cats, and I have an outdoor cat that I take care of. So it feels a little much right now. I'm not moderating my pet responsibilities, but anyway, it'll work out. It'll all calm down when it's not so new. Anyway, are there things we don't moderate? Yes. I don't try to moderate heroin. So when we say we're going to moderate our eating and our drinking, I think what we're saying is, I know that this thing I want to eat or drink is not completely benign. It could be damaging to me if I have too much of it, right? So I'm going to try to moderate this thing. So I'm going to mostly talk today about sugar and alcohol as two things that we might want to reconsider moderating for a couple of reasons. Let's see. Another thing that we don't moderate is drinking antifreeze, right? We don't try to moderate that. We don't try to moderate everything. Antifreeze tastes sweet, which is why it can be dangerous for like your dogs and your cats to get into. But it would make me sick really fast. I would know this is not okay. I got to go to the hospital now, right? The things we're talking about moderating, we're saying, okay, I know it's not completely benign if I overdo it, but I think it's mostly benign as long as I don't overdo it. So let's think about this more critically. I think one of the things we're saying is that this is pretty benign. Alcohol, sugar, pretty benign as long as we don't overdo it. See, another cat. Anyway, I should be recording in case I have any trouble with this. So there are plenty of things we don't try to moderate, but there's a lot of processed foods that we might try to moderate. There's alcohol, there's sweetened foods that we might try to moderate. So let's explore the question of, are these things pretty benign, or are they going to poison us like antifreeze, but just slower, right? So are these things we're trying to moderate benign? So when you look into the research on this, now I wanted to believe these are benign. I wanted to have direction about how much can I have before I hurt myself, right? How much wine can I drink? I felt like wine was important to me. Cocktails were important to me. A lot of sweetened things were important to me. Like I would save up my calories to eat and drink these things, especially with this whole focus on all I got to do is manage to a certain number of calories, which is so promoted in our environment. And other places I talk about why that is not the most helpful approach. It's really going to lead us astray. But while I'm trying to, manage within a certain number of calories or points for a lot of years, I was trying to figure out, well, how can I save some of my calories for these things that I want to moderate, like snacky things and sweet things and wine, etc. And so I was always looking for evidence that they're pretty benign. It's okay to have these. They had become really important to me. And I'm going to talk about why that is, why they had become important, and why even talking about, about abstaining from them sounded super scary and may not need to, right? So as I finally said, I'm going to really try to honestly look at the research here and look at how benign or not benign, how damaging are these things. And as I dug more and more into the research, it was getting clearer and clearer that sugar and alcohol particularly lead to a whole lot of systemic damage. So they lead to systemic inflammation. For example, I had pain and inflammation throughout my system that had gotten worse and worse and worse over the years, to the point where I could barely walk anymore in my mid-50s. I definitely couldn't hike in the mountains anymore, even though it was a dream that I would keep being able to do that, right? So they cause systemic inflammation. That's not small, that's serious, right? They cause dysregulation of various hormones. So they cause cortisol to be elevated, making us feel anxious and stressed, right? Making it hard for us to sleep. How many people developed insomnia? I had terrible insomnia I never thought I could get rid of. And when I cut these foods out and started eating nutritious foods, that all changed. They also cause dysregulation in our hunger hormones. So sugar and alcohol both cause us to develop more and more hunger. They start to really break down the hormones in our system that naturally tell us that was enough. You can stop now, stop eating, right? So we end up with a sort of insatiable hunger caused by eating things that are made with sugar or by drinking alcohol. They cause insulin resistance, and this may be the cause of most of the chronic illness that people are living with, that people are developing in their 60s and 70s, or even earlier. My housekeeper's son in his teens started developing insulin resistance. He really enjoyed sweetened things. He really enjoyed lots of stuff like that. And he was developing he was developing high blood sugar, insulin resistance, heart disease, and really had to change the way he was eating. It's a zoo. Let me show this one. She's a cutie and she's not exactly feeling well. All right, so are these things benign? These things are shown to cause hardened arteries. They're shown to cause heart disease and stroke, right? Harm to various organs, our pancreas, our kidneys, our liver, our heart, our brain, our joints, right? So my joints were really, really inflamed and making it hard for me to walk when I was defending these foods in my diet. These things are contributing to cancer. So alcohol's been known to cause cancer since the 80s. And just last year, the American Cancer Society said, we've been trying to tell you, how many drinks are safe, but when it comes to cancer, no amount of alcohol is considered safe. I was always looking for that, right? What's a safe amount to drink that won't, so what did I mean? Well, that won't push me into some kind of disease process that I can't recover from, or that will steal my health, right? Sugar and alcohol both cause diabetes, are both big contributors to developing diabetes. And there's a lot more and more indication that they also contribute to dementia. Sounds so discouraging, right? Why am I trying to moderate these things? Okay, they're not making me sick as fast as antifreeze. They're making us sick in a very, very slow way. But really, people are developing these diseases associated with our eating and drinking earlier and earlier. I was just talking about a teenager, but most of us now can expect to spend the last 10 years of our lives sick from one of these chronic diseases that is very strongly tied to our diet. So they may not be benign, right? So it's one big reason moderation may not be a good idea. I was always looking for how much of this can I get away with without having too much consequence, right? I was 60 pounds overweight. I was having hot flashes, insomnia, brain fog. I was having consequences. I just didn't realize it until I changed my eating and drinking. But this, how much can I get away with eating this and drinking this without consequences, was a sort of a constant exploration for me. That's one sign that moderation may not be worthwhile. Are you having to constantly try to figure out how to limit it? It may be taking more time and energy than you want. I feel like since I figured out how to eat right to actually make my body healthy, the amount of thinking about and stressing about what I'm going to eat and what I'm going to drink has just shrunk, so that it has become a very easeful, very nourishing part of my life instead of a stressful, what should I eat and drink aspect of life, right? Is anybody seeing me right now? Interact with me, tell me if you're there. I see no comments yet. Let me look at another place. See, I bet people are saying something and I just can't see it. I can't tell. All right. So if anybody's here with me, let me know. I'll try to respond. Okay. How much is too much is a big question that you're having to constantly try to figure out. How much sugar is too much? How much alcohol is too much? I was always looking that stuff up, right? And it's very vague. This is one of the reasons why moderation may be more trouble than it's worth. Well, where's the research telling me how much alcohol is safe? Where's the research telling me how much sugar is safe? What exactly is a moderate amount where I'm not going to have negative consequences, right? Should I have one more cookie? Should I have one more glass of wine? Is this constant question. How much can I have before it really starts to harm me? So there are some guidelines you can find out there, right? There's always organizations trying to give us some kind of guidelines. But generally, the conclusions are it's best not to have very much of either of these things. And I think the sugar one is very complicated because we're eating so much more sugar than we were 100 years ago or 200 years ago or 300 years ago. I think in 1700, it was an average of 4 pounds of sugar per year. The next year, it was like the next century, it was like 18 pounds of sugar per year. Like that's a huge jump, right? And now it's more like it's getting closer to 200 pounds of sugar a year. So even those of us who feel like I'm not eating anywhere near as much sugar as other people, may be eating way more than is tolerable by our systems, which it looks like is a big reason why there's so much heart disease and diabetes and cancer and obesity. These four diseases, especially, probably dementia is going to be more and more proven also to be very big in there. So figuring out how much is too much, am I doing too much? How do I do less? How do I do enough that it's not too much? This was becoming a big stressor in my life that I was starting to realize I could eliminate this if I quit trying to moderate these things. So another issue is, one is they're not benign. So maybe I don't want to moderate them because they're harmful to my body. And the other big issue that maybe makes me not want to moderate them is they're addictive. Both of these, both alcohol and sugar are found to be very addictive, very neurochemically addictive. So this is both a reason we feel very upset about the idea of giving them up. And it's also a reason it may be a bad idea to try to moderate them. Anything that's addictive is going to be very difficult to moderate because your brain gets tricked. So let's just explain what happens neurochemically in the brain. So this is where I started realizing, okay, I've taken several neuropsych classes at a graduate level, and the arguments I'm making that I'm getting from my culture don't make sense when it comes to neurochemistry. So let me help you understand this. The reason these things feel so pleasurable, so exciting, so rewarding is that they give a big boost of dopamine, an excessive and unusual boost of dopamine in our brain. And dopamine initially feels like pleasure. It feels like, yes, that was good, right? You think about how you feel when you first have a drink of alcohol or you first take a bite of chocolate, and it's a big pleasure. It's not a small, moderate, calm kind of pleasure. It's big, it's excessive, right? The intensity of that dopamine hit in the brain signals to your survival brain, the primitive part of your brain, this is important. It tells your primitive brain, this seems like it's probably important for survival, and we should make sure we know where we got it and where we can get more tomorrow, right? So the way our brain works makes moderating anything that's addictive a setup. It's a setup for cravings. It's a setup for thinking too much about this, for stressing over this thing that's not actually good for you, right? So the same thing that makes sugar and alcohol pleasurable also makes them feel important to our survival, which isn't true, right? We don't need to drink any alcohol to survive, and we don't need to eat any processed sugar to survive. But we're getting this idea in our brain, this seems important for survival, and we should get more, get more, get more, get more. We used to think dopamine was a chemical of pleasure, and to some degree it is, but it's more a chemical of wanting, of where do I get more of that, than it is a chemical of enjoying. That's why we can get something that we enjoy and we just keep going and going. I think about getting a pint of ice cream, and the first bite is the most pleasurable, and then the pleasure kind of drops off. And I would keep chasing that pleasurable feeling, like where's the extra exciting experience? I was constantly chasing these dopamine hits, right? So your brain flags that kind of excess response as important. So you'll look for it again the next day. You feel that? You feel that drive toward, how do I get more of that today? Ooh, is it time to have something sweet, right? I was looking for something sweet at the end of every meal. I was more and more looking for the glass of wine or 2 glasses of wine every night. So whether it's sugar or alcohol, it starts to feel very important to us, more important than we want it to, right? Not because we decided this is important. Exactly. Not because of that, but because the dopamine response has hijacked our brain and told our brain this is important. So as you eat or drink more of these things, you get more cravings, but you don't get more pleasure. That is irritating to me. So as I started reminding myself of the neuropsychology here, I started wanting to stand against this instead of defend it. So that's what I kind of invite my clients to start doing. Maybe I don't want to defend this addictive response anymore. Maybe I want to stop this addictive response if it's possible, right? So, yeah, so you get more desire for it instead of more pleasure, right? So the pleasure, the high starts to get out of reach. Like I'm chasing it, but I'm not getting there anymore. We find this with drugs of addiction. We find it with alcohol. I believe it also happens with sugar. I remember one of the things that I would do in the evening, lots of times I would feel like I deserve some special food and drink tonight. I said that to myself every day. So it started feeling like, I'm not sure that word means what you think it means, Ginny, that special word. But I was looking for like an excess dopamine response is what I finally started realizing. I need something really special. And I would go out to dinner and I would order wine. I would order something that sounded really special. I'd order special. Lots of times I wasn't ordering. Once I started ordering wine, I quit ordering dessert, right? So sugar, either way. No, whatever it was, generally I was disappointed, right? So it was driving wanting more than it was driving enjoyment. And that is a feature of anything that gives an excess dopamine response, right? So So the addictive nature of these things makes moderation kind of a bad idea. What if you could actually crave the stuff that's good for you? Wouldn't that be life-changing? That's what I started wanting. I remember I would set an intention. I used to cry. I used to cry about feeling like that's impossible. That's not going to happen. That's really, really hard. Why can't I crave the things? Why can't I crave broccoli? I think one of my clients said that to me this week. We can start to really crave the good stuff. I discovered a process for helping people leave behind craving things that aren't good for us and really start craving the things that are good for us. Now, I want to tell you another piece of the cravings for the things that aren't good for us, the things that give an excess dopamine response. So they're driving us to want more, 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 right? They're making us more hungry. Another thing that happens when we get any kind of excess dopamine response, which feeds addiction, is that our bodies perceive that was too much. That was a lot. And our bodies like balance, right? So any kind of excess, our body looks for a way to correct that. It looks to create homeostasis, right? This is why we develop diabetes when we're eating too much sugar, drinking too much alcohol. We're developing this excess sugar response because our body is trying to compensate. Our body starts blocking insulin. And then our body perceives there's not enough insulin, so it starts creating more, blocking it, creating it, it's just floating around, bumping into our organs, causing illness, causing disease, right? That's part of what's happening in our current environment with eating too much sugar, drinking too much alcohol. So excess anything, our body tries to correct for it. So when our body perceives that was a big hit of dopamine, it goes into action to correct that, to balance that out. And it does a couple of things. One is it blocks the dopamine receptors in our brain. It says, we got too much dopamine. Let's start shutting down some of those receptors. Now we can't get the pleasure anymore. We can't get anywhere near as much pleasure, which is why we're chasing it even harder. That's part of what addiction is. It's terrible, right? Another thing it does is it starts sending depressant chemicals into the system to correct for the excess dopamine that's in there. So we start to feel more depressed after you've had this experience, right? Where you get a big rush after having some sugar and then later you just crash. That is actually something biochemical that's happening in your body. When you start to see all this, you can start to say, you know what? I want to stop that. I don't want to keep that process functioning in my body where I'm constantly driven to want this toxic stuff that is addictive, and then my body's trying to correct for it and causing illness in response, right? So these corrections make you feel down, make you feel depressed, make you feel irritated, and you want to feel good again, so you're naturally driven toward that dopamine high, right? To get more of that stuff. That's what your brain learned. This stuff is important for me. So it's high, low, high, low. It feels awful. And I started realizing, okay, having one cookie leads me to want more cookies. Having one drink leads me to want more drinks. And then it leads me to feel good. And then it leads me to feel down. And so I'm having these terrible ups and downs and these cravings because I'm trying to moderate this addictive thing, right? Make sense? What do you guys think? Anybody here to interact with me? I see that here you are. Thanks, Pamela. Good to see you. Glad you're here. Hi, Kathy. Good to see you. Sugar's your nemesis, Louise. Yeah. So maybe we don't want to moderate something that is a nemesis, right? What about foods that convert to sugar in our body? Yeah, I'm not going to talk a whole lot about those today because it just starts getting too complicated. But yeah, there are highly starchy foods that convert very quickly to sugar, and that can have a very similar situation. All right, so these cravings, this addictive response is how sugar or alcohol or both can become more important to you than you ever wanted them to be. And I can tell you for myself, as I started remembering what I learned as a psychologist and applying it in my life, right? I started making a mindset shift. I started shifting away from, I started hearing myself say, how much of this can I get away with? How much of this stuff that's bad for me can I get away with before it truly starts to cause damage? And here I am with insomnia and brain fog and pain and inflammation and difficulty walking and 60 excess pounds. You know what, Ginny? Maybe it is already causing damage. I had this big wake up call you guys have probably heard me talk about, where I started working in nursing homes and seeing people with diabetes and heart disease and stroke, and they weren't much older than me. And as I started researching what is causing these diseases, I started seeing, just like I've developed prediabetes, it's eating and drinking that's causing most of these chronic diseases that are hitting people and landing them in nursing homes way too early. So people are really losing their function. And I was losing my function. It's like, hello, maybe you can still change this. How about if you make a change? And I was scared. These things are important to me. My wine, my chocolate, etc. This is important to me. That I kind of built my life around these things. Like, I work to be able to afford the most expensive chocolate and wine every night, right? It's almost like, it's like the center of my life. It is my pleasure. Well, I can't walk anymore at that point, right? So this is my pleasure. And so it was super scary to me to think about, well, if I don't moderate, I'm talking about abstaining. That made sense, because even if you're just talking about a habit that's not addictive, intermittent reinforcement, like I'm not going to do it every time, I'm just going to do it periodically. Like I'm not going to have dessert with every meal. I'm just going to have it with dinner, or I'm just going to have wine on Friday nights and Saturday nights, and then I'm not going to. This is intermittent reinforcement of a habit, which is the best way to make the habit really hard to get away from. It's the best way to strengthen a habit. I'm training a new puppy right now, and if I want her to learn to sit every time she wants to go outside, at first I gave her a treat every time. It was, reinforcement every time. And then it became more intermittent, because that actually strengthens the habit, the behavior I'm trying to create. So I started realizing I am keeping this habit going by trying to moderate these things. Then you add this whole layer of the fact that they're addictive and that they're causing cravings, right? When you get the cravings, you feel like, I can't possibly resist this, right? Okay, I'll resist it today, but tomorrow I'm having some. But that's a great way to keep the addictive response going. So when I kind of realized, okay, you probably should just try to abstain for a while. It was terrifying to me. It was terrifying to me. This is going to suck. I'm going to be miserable. I'm going to have no pleasure in life. That's a sign that you're involved with something addictive, right? I had a friend whose dad became addicted to heroin during the Vietnam War. It was his way of getting out of the war. And I asked him about it, and he said, you can't possibly understand. Once you've had heroin, everything else in life is just gray and dull and miserable. You're only happy when you're doing the heroin. Oh God, I don't want that, And I started feeling like, that's how I feel about sugar, and that's how I feel about my wine. Like I couldn't possibly enjoy life without them. I love Brussels sprouts, but if a doctor told me you're going to die if you have another Brussels sprout, I wouldn't feel that upset about cutting out Brussels sprouts. I'd find something else, right? But when it came to the addictive stuff like sugar and alcohol, it was terrifying to me. So I just decided I'm taking a period of time. I actually decided on a year, because I felt like I'm headed for the nursing home. I can't even walk anymore, really, right? It was hard even doing the grocery shopping. I'm headed for big trouble, big declines in my health and in my life. If I don't change this, I'm not headed for a happy, bright future. So I'm going to abstain for a period of time and see if it really can give me my health back. And so I gave myself a year, no sugar, no alcohol. And I'm going to really work at finding nutritious foods that I really thoroughly enjoy. And that's one of the other things about making sure that you prioritize sugar, processed foods, alcohol, is that they're crowding out the nutritious foods your body actually needs. So I started working on these two things at the same time. And my whole mindset started to shift from how much of the bad stuff can I get away with to a mindset of, I think everything I eat or drink either helps my body or harms my body. I'm going to quit lying to myself about that. I'm going to quit saying, okay, I know this is bad for me, but it's not that bad for me, right? I'm going to quit saying that. My body is hurt, and I'm going to start caring about helping it become its best. I got passionate about it. I was scared, but I was also determined. I don't care. I don't care how hard this is. For a while, I'm doing this. I'm going to see what it's like. I have to tell you, by the way, when you do these at the same time, sugar and alcohol, cravings go away so fast. You don't know that if you haven't been trying to abstain, right? But they go away. I find a lot of people, the cravings are gone within 24 hours. It's fast. So I really shifted. If everything I eat or drink is either helpful or harmful to my body, I want to find out what's really helpful to my body, and I want to thoroughly enjoy it. And it was a bit of a process, finding the things that were, it was years trying to figure out what's actually truly beneficial to the body, getting through all the popular press, looking at the research, what's actually really helpful to my body. So that was first, and getting really clear about that and how much of that do I need to really heal my body. And the next process was, okay, how do I find ways to thoroughly enjoy the things that are good for my body? It's turned out I'm looking forward right now to going and having a giant salad. When I first thought about having a giant salad almost every day, I thought, no, that sounds sad and boring. It's not. I look forward to it a lot. Not exactly in a dopamine, an excess dopamine way, but I look forward to it a lot. I thoroughly enjoy it, but it was a little bit of a process figuring out what would make it thoroughly enjoyable, right? How long did it take my mindset to shift? I'm not sure. When I started doing this, I was trying to save my life in a lot of ways, right? I wasn't thinking I'm going to help a whole bunch of people with this, right? I'm a psychologist. I've been helping people with habit change for 35 years, but weight loss, I didn't know how it worked, right? And so it didn't occur to me I'd end up helping people with this. So I don't have a perfect description of exactly how I did this, but I would say, as I started finding clarity about what actually will make a difference, that really started my mindset shifting. Yes, these things are good for my body and these things are bad for my body. And it's actually pretty clear. If I didn't live in this culture with all the millions of dollars spent marketing bad stuff to me, I would know. But I'm so confused growing up in this culture, right? And with all the marketing coming at me about, all the bad things are packaged with some kind of message about why it's good for you, which is mostly a lie. So getting clarity about what's actually good for me, that was a bit of a process. That took me at least a year. And I keep reinforcing that, looking for that information. And then figuring out how to thoroughly enjoy the stuff that was good for me, I would say definitely took a year. And the mindset shift from how much can I get away with? It was just all part of the process, but it's part of what I'm really help my clients do, because knowing what actually works, that's really important. That's absolutely critical. You go and get some diet book that doesn't about an approach that doesn't work, you're not going to be very successful. But there's also the mindset piece and the lifestyle piece. And that's why I love working with women over 40, because we can get this. We can understand there are mindsets keeping me trapped, and I can change those, right? So everything I eat or drink either helps or harms my body. And I have a firm intention to help my body, because it matters not because somebody told me to, not because I'm going to be judged at the pearly gates about how well I took care of my body. It's because I want to live a fruitful, enjoyable, rich life for as long as possible. And I really went from, I'm going to end up in the nursing home in my 60s or 70s to, I'm going to be hiking in the mountains in my 90s, right? I really saw this huge shift. So, there are these things I don't try to moderate anymore. Sugar and alcohol are two of these things because they're not benign. They're damaging to my body, and I don't need to put damaging things into my body. Just because they're really common in my culture and I used to enjoy them doesn't mean I need to eat those. I don't need to. I'm not going to try to moderate them. I also don't moderate them because they're addictive and I hate cravings. And it's just a way of causing tremendous stress in my life to try to moderate something that's addictive, right? I'm just battling with my own brain and body every day, right? All right, I need to wrap up here. So my conclusion, moderation may not be best for all things. Maybe we only talk about moderating things that are bad for us. So I catch those words in my head. I'll just have a little. What did I just say? Am I talking about something that's bad for me? Why do I want a little? Is it something that's addictive for me? Having a little is going to start cravings again, right? So are you tired of cravings for things that aren't good for you, right? Non-nutritious stuff, non-nutritious food-like substances that could be contributing to high blood pressure or high blood sugar or excess fat, excess weight, etc. Are you tired of craving those things? So if you'd like to make the non-nutritious food-like substances lose their appeal, just not feel important to you anymore, I want you to know that may be easier than you think. You can completely lose those cravings for those things. The cravings can go away and you can actually come to crave the nutritious things that your body loves that will heal your body so fast. It's been remarkable to me. I had no idea that insomnia could completely go away and I could sleep really well every night. I had no idea. I thought I was just always going to be insomniac. I had no idea the pain and inflammation I'd lived with for 35 years could just go away. And I had no idea I could absolutely quit craving those non-nutritious things that felt so important to me, right? So you can come to crave the nutritious stuff. I have a process that I call Crave the Good, and it's life-changing, and it's a little bit step by step. But it isn't hard, and it's so rewarding to crave the things that are good for your body, right? And it really helps when you stop trying to moderate the food-like substances that are non-nutritious, that are addictive, right? Especially sugar and alcohol. You can just abstain from those things. This is the society, the food manufacturers, the alcohol industry, they're going to tell you, just have a little, as long as you're not an alcoholic, just have some, just have one, right? You can abstain from those things just because they're not good for you and they're addictive and they cause cravings and they get in the way of eating nutritious stuff that's actually good for your body, right? Turned out to be so much easier than I thought it was going to be. My clients tell me that all the time. This is not hard, right? It's hard as long as you try to moderate, honestly. It just feels impossible as long as you try to moderate. And it also crowds out the nutritious stuff that your body actually needs. So if you'd like to know more about how sustainable weight loss works for women over 40, doesn't work the way most of the programs and books out there are telling you, I'd like to invite you to get a free copy of my roadmap to sustainable weight loss at slenderforgood.com. And I'd love to see if you have any other comments that you'd like to share with me about this. What do you think now that we had this conversation? Do you think that you would be interested in stopping trying to moderate things that are not good for you, that are not benign, things that are cravingful and addictive, right? That you'd like to try that? Because, the world will tell you, you should moderate it. Just have a little, just have it on the weekends, just have it here, just have it there. But that's a great way to keep cravings going. But won't I feel deprived? That's a mindset that you can shift. I'm not deprived. I'm eating abundant, nutritious food, and I feel better than I felt in my 40s. I'm in my 60s now, right? I don't feel deprived. It's food industry and alcohol industry trying to tell me I need to be eating and drinking these highly profitable things, at least a little. I don't believe it anymore. It's a lie. I don't have to do it. I can thoroughly enjoy nutritious foods. All right. I'd love to hear what you guys think about that. Thank you for joining me today. I'll see you later.